Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Prashant.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Amulya. How are you?
Yeah, sir, fine. How are you, sir?
Not very fine, but I'm okay.
Why so, sir?
Just like that. Who is teaching you what? This
Public
semester?
now, sir, don't know.
Which
Really?
subject, sir?
Huh?
Which subject? Political science?
Hmm.
Nobody is teaching, sir.
Nobody is teaching.
Nobody. No classes on political science. Only we are having other two classes. I mean, history and economic classes.
Ah, okay.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening. So, Prashant, what were we doing yesterday? Where did we stop?
Sir, we are at American Constitution. We are discussing Senate represents states of America and representatives represent the people of America.
Hmm. Yeah, we were
We
talking
are
about
comparing
the.
with Rome, sir. How
Huh?
did they? We are doing comparison. I mean, we are saying that how Americans drew their constitution. That is, their inspiration is from Rome.
Okay, so the American legislature is called the Congress. The upper house is the and the House of Representatives is the lower house. And I told you the upper house represents the states and the lower house represents the people. Do you know what the flag of America is called? Anyone? Well, nowadays it's called the Star Spangled Banner, but originally it was called the stars and stripes. How many stripes are there? Does anyone know? Hello?
No idea, sir.
Well, the number of stripes are 13 in the American flag. The number of stripes are 13, and that 13 signifies the original 13 states that that came together to form the United States of America. The number of stars are 50, which represent all the 50 states that exist today. Okay, so that's why it was called Stars and Stripes. Now it's called the Star Spangled Banner. Anyway, to get back to the houses, the House of Representatives is constituted okay. The House of Representatives is constituted on the basis of the population of the states that are there. So, a big state like California, Texas, these states have greater number of representatives, which is the case even with our Lok Sabha. And our Lok Sabha is supposed to have and I was telling you the other day that if at one time before the division of UP and sorry, uh, before the division of UP and the um, state of Bihar, people said if you won in these two states, it was enough to rule the country because they had the highest populations and they also had the highest number of representatives being sent to the Lok Sabha as well as the Rajya Sabha. Because please remember that it is, if you have greater number of seats in the Lok Sabha, it automatically translates to greater number of seats in the Rajya Sabha because it is the Rajya Sabha is elected by members of legislative assemblies, and the bigger the states, the more the legislators in each of the states, and the more the number of representatives in the Rajya Sabha. So it is an erroneous notion that the Rajya Sabha represents the states in India. Whereas if you look at the Senate, It has 2 members. Each state, and the total strength therefore is 100. Right. The biggest state, I think, is California. It used to be Texas, but it has now become California, I think. And the smallest state is Delaware, Delaware. So if you look at either California or Delaware, you will find that both of them send 2 members to the parliament. They send 2 members to the parliament, and
Sir, biggest in terms of area.
no, in terms of population.
Okay.
Yeah. So, irrespective of that, it sends 2 people, and the House of Representatives, if it sends some number of people to the if the House of Representatives represents, it tries to pass a bill, then the bill has to be ratified by the Senate. And the Senate is the true upper house because it has the right to reject the, what do we say? It has the right to reject the, sorry, it has the right to reject the bills proposed by the House of Representatives. I think towards the end of the class, I was talking about the impeachment of Donald Trump. In the last year of his presidency, he was impeached twice, or so claimed Nancy Pelosi, Nancy, Nancy Pelosi, Pelosi, who was the Speaker of the House of Representatives, but the Senate, which has a greater strength of Republican senators. So if you look at that, then what you find is that it rejected the impeachment twice, not once. Okay. Now, I told you that Montesquieu's theory of separation of powers was put to true use in the USA. And the second thing that we say is the USA is the world's second biggest democracy, right? And we say that the USA follows a two-party system. Now let's examine each of these. The theory of separation of powers was put in the USA. Okay. According to the 25th Amendment, I think, the president can now actually address the joint sitting of the Senate and the House of Representatives in the legislature section of the Capitol. I hope you remember the idea of the okay. So there is supposed to be otherwise a separation of powers. Initially, the president could not enter the uh, what do we say? Could not enter the legislature. He could only send messages. Uh, so they said they had a proper separation of powers. Well, as it so turns out, this notion is not very accurate. This notion is not very accurate because in theory there is a separation of powers, but in practice there a separation of powers. All the judges to the Supreme Court of America and various other courts, that various other Supreme Courts of different states, all of these judges are appointed by the president. So you can say When I say judges do not retire, the judges have no age of superannuation. Okay, and right now, if you look at the number of judges in the United States of America, in the Supreme Court of America, which is the federal court, or if you also look at other states, you will see that the most number of judges have been appointed by Republican presidents. And since they do not retire, they can hold on to that post as long as they live. Okay, there is no impartiality in the, what should we say, in the judiciary. And if judges are appointed by the president, then the question is there really a separation of powers? Okay. And also remember that I have just given you one example of impeachment of Donald Trump not happening. Before that, there was also an attempt to impeach Bill Clinton. And at that time, the Democrats were in greater numbers. And if they were in greater numbers, then the thing is, they saw to the fact that Bill Clinton was not impeached. In the history of America, 3 presidents have been attempted to be impeached, but none of them were impeached. I have forgotten who the 3rd president is, the name of the 3rd president against whom impeachment procedures were initiated. Richard Nixon, people were going to impeach him after the Watergate scandal. And he realized that he would be impeached. Okay. And so what he did is he resigned before the impeachment actually happened. So technically, no president has been impeached. Okay. And that is because of the fact that the majorities in the Senate usually are the same as the person who is coming from the president who is coming from one particular group, which is either Democrats or Republicans. Okay. So this whole idea of, having separation of powers that would check the powers of each of the presidents, who will check the powers of the legislature and the judiciary, which will check the powers of both. All these are basically myths. If you see the practice, that actually happened in the United States of America. So in theory, yes, they have a separation of powers, because unlike in India and in Britain, where you don't have to be, what do we say, where you don't have to be elected to the parliament in order to become the prime minister. The president has no powers here. The United Kingdom has no president. It has a monarchical head. So this, in contrast to this, if you look at the America, on paper, it looks like it has theory of separation of powers properly drafted into the Constitution. That is basically what we think it is. But if you examine the functioning of the American political system, you will find that there is really no, what should I say, a clear delineation of powers, because all judges are appointed by the president. And just imagine now there is a completely, what should I say, there is a judiciary that is dominated by Republican appointed members or judges, and the party is the Democratic Party, which is supposed to have sent the president and the running mate. And so if you look at that, you will find that they will not act without bias. If they acted in favor of Donald Trump, perhaps tomorrow they will not act in favor of Joe Biden. But the advantage that Joe Biden has is that the House of Representatives, the lower house, is dominated by Democrats. Okay, so that advantage he has. So that will nullify the advantage that you have with the Senate. So therefore, strictly speaking, even though the Senate is supposed to represent the interests of the state, so that smaller states do not get dominated by bigger states, in the actual working of the politics of America, the Senate as the representative of the states is hardly something that you witness. Okay, that it represents the states is something that you don't witness at all, or very rarely you witness that. Now let's come to this other proposition. The USA is the world's second biggest democracy. You want to say something, Rakesh?
Sir, which is the first biggest democracy country, sir?
India. India is
Okay,
the
sir.
biggest democracy.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir.
Hmm.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah. And shortly we'll be the most populous nation in the world. I think 5 or 10 years and we will be as big as China or bigger in terms of our population. And there will be very little space for other animals. And the Chinese can also stop attacking us, because if they attack us, then they won't have a place to walk in our country. That is how thickly populated we are. And that is precisely the reason why the COVID-19 pandemic is raging in India now. This was predicted um, by an Italian epidemiologist more than 7 or 8 months ago. He said India will have a second wave, and it's a matter of great concern as to what will happen when the second wave comes. Well, we are seeing what's happening, which is very unfortunate. Anyway, so if the USA is the world's second biggest democracy, and the US president has many times been called the world's most powerful individual. Okay, that he may be. But please remember that he is not directly elected by the people of the United States of America. He is somebody who is elected by an electoral college comprising of 538 members. And these 538 members of the electoral college are elected to the electoral college by what the Americans call the popular vote. So people of different states will go and vote for who will go to the electoral college. Now, the logic apparently is that you have to represent the views of your constituents or your voters once you go into the electoral college. If you have been voted by a large number of Democrats, then you're supposed to represent the interests of the Democrats or supporters of the Democrats. Okay, and the same thing with the Republicans. But the problem is, you don't know who's elected who, though people do have some basis of counting. And if you look at what happened in the year 2000, watershed year, not a Watergate year. Watershed year because that was the year when it was believed that more number of people voted for Al Gore as the president, the Democratic candidate, and less number of people wanted George W. Bush or George Bush, Jr. But the Electoral College voted for Bush. So Al Gore claimed that he had the popular vote, and he went to the Supreme Court of America, which passed a judgment that the popular vote is not recognized by the Constitution. What is recognized by the Constitution is only the vote of the Electoral College. So, since the Electoral College had voted for George W. Bush, he became the president, despite Al Gore claiming that he had more popular votes. The same scenario was played out in 2016. Hillary Clinton is supposed to have polled nearly 2 million votes, more than Donald Trump, as far as the popular vote is concerned. And what happened? Yet again, the Electoral College voted for Donald Trump. They voted for Donald Trump, and he became the president. Okay, so yes, Ms. Rachna.
Sir, the president may buy the electoral college. How can it is democratic, sir? People have the real power, no?
Buying doesn't happen. Their politics are not like our politics. This is not to say that their politics are not corrupt. This is not to say that there is as much corruption. I will be coming to the idea of how the system of lobbying came into being in the United States of America in just a couple of minutes. So it's not buying the Electoral College, but
With the
one
power,
has, that is why I'm questioning what kind of a democracy is a country in which 538 people elect with a simple majority. Okay, if you elect for a particular candidate, that candidate wins. So what kind of democracy is that? That is precisely the question I'm also raising. The question that you have raised. Okay, and you will see that in the recent years, starting with the Y2K, okay, the Y2K bug needed to be fixed at the end of the last century, or rather by the end of the last century. Otherwise, computer programs would have crashed. And when we talk about computer programs, we are not talking about our computers. We are talking about computers which are supercomputers. Okay, the world's most powerful and biggest computer is supposed to be the Cray, C-R-A-Y, Cray computer, which is there with the United States. The Russians have supercomputers. We also have supercomputers. I have forgotten the name given to our supercomputers, but we also have supercomputers. Now, what does Y2K stand for? Anyone?
The year 2000.
Yeah, year 2000, that's what it is. K is kilo,
Thousand.
and kilo, according to uh, uh, kilo, according to the Greeks, is 1,000. So you'll hear people say 2K. The American usage of it is grand. Okay, the American slang for 1,000 is grand. Uh, it K is more of a European thing, but it is also used in America. So Y2K, the problem was with the dating. The dating, if you write like this, like for example, MM, sorry, why am I being an American? This was the format that most of the world used: day, month, and year. Okay, the last two digits of the year were used in the 20th century. The Americans, of course, have to be different, so they introduced this system: month, sorry, date, and year, right? So now what has happened is that they have found that in the year 2000, you'll have, once the new millennium came in, you'll have 01, 01, 00. Then what happens to the data? Lots of things will go crashing, including aircraft, because aircraft instrument landing systems, radars, all of these things are run now by computers. Okay, and timing of aircraft and how many aircraft are in a particular airspace. Okay, all that is also done through computers. So you can have literally the crash of aircraft, but you can have the crash of the stock markets. You can have the crash of the data of the government. So that had to be fixed in a hurry. And that is when the Americans actually realized that they are not as intelligent as they think they are, and that they didn't have an intellectual workforce to take care of the problems that were there in their country. So that is where our South Indians uh, took advantage, because here everybody does maths. Everybody, about 90% of the population wants to be engineers, and about 9% of the population wants to be, uh, what should I say, uh, doctors, and the rest want to be commerce students, I think, the 1%, or 0.8% will want to be commerce students, and 0.2% will want to study social sciences in the southern part of the country. Uh, it's a different demographic in the northern part, uh, where they hardly had engineering as a course. It's only now that it's picking up again, and that is also mainly through private universities like JNU, such a well-known institution, didn't have and doesn't have an engineering college or engineering school. Okay, Delhi University didn't. So many of these didn't have. So it's a different demographic there. And that is the reason why once Mr. Bill Gates, while praising the Chinese and Indians, said the most hardworking people, and I have seen hardworking and smart working. That was a new phrase at one time. He said the most hardworking and smart working people in the world are the Chinese and the South Indians. Okay. He didn't care two hoots about the North Indians, because they were not going to sit and write algorithms and codes for his software. All right. So he talks about South Indians. And even in South Indians, it is Telugus followed by Tamilians. Right. And so, anyway, so what we do find is cities like Hyderabad, Bangalore, Madras, it was called Madras then, they all emptied out, okay, because all the computer professionals were here in these cities, and they emptied out. They went off to the States, and the Chinese started going to the States. And with that, the Americans started having a problem of immigration. And that is the reason why you will see that till 2000 there was no problem in terms of the mismatch between the so-called popular vote and the vote of the electoral college. Till 2000 there was no mismatch. The mismatch happened in the year 2000, because they were suddenly scared that too many people were coming into America from India, China, and from some European countries as well. Too many immigrants, and that would mean that, it'll upset the uh, kind of demographics that the Americans were used to. And that is a time when, they always were dot busters, specifically against Indians. Dot busters, they are called that because they were the Indian women wear the bindi, which they call the dot. And the dot busters, I have had uncles who went to the United States in the 60s, 1960s. Uh, and in those days, there weren't many Indians. And the Indians who went there did very well. They became rich. So these people were targeted by the dot busters. And the way in which they used to attack them was by pouring cold water on somebody who was walking on the road uh, in the winter. If an Indian was walking on the road, they would pour absolutely cold water on the Indians. So that is what they found. The they didn't want. So the dot busters were there. So were the neo-Nazis. The neo-Nazis were there because they said America is the greatest nation in the world and other people shouldn't be coming here. And the neo-Nazis are still there. The dot busters are not so prolific now as they were at one time. But the neo-Nazis are there. And there are other people who have come up, the skinheads, shaven heads, who also represent a certain form of militancy against immigration. And you have the rednecks. Okay, you have the rednecks there because these are people who believed in lynching non-whites, especially Hispanics and Puerto Ricans. Okay, they wanted to lynch them all and kick them out of the country. So, and that's the reason why Donald Trump appealed to all these people. Appealed meaning he had an appeal to all these people because he said, I'm building a wall with Mexico. So there would be no free movement between Mexico. Technically, it is supposed to be pronounced Mexico, Mexico and USA. He said we'll separate them through the wall. And he also made statements like he'll make the Mexicans pay for the wall. So he appealed basically to rednecks, neo-Nazis, all of whom can now be clubbed under one category, which is called white supremacists. Okay, white supremacists. They believe in the supremacy of the white population, the white supremacists. Okay, and they want, they don't want people coming into the United States of America. So you'll see that Donald Trump actually tried to stop immigration, especially through H-1B visas, which are work visas. And these visas, he started having a quota per country. You can't send more than this. That's what Donald Trump tried to do. Um, But much before that, in the year 2000, when George Bush realized that he was somebody who was supported by these white supremacists, he had a very astute um, ally, Mitt Romney, and it was Mitt Romney's idea to outsource jobs from India. Okay, if you're outsourcing jobs of manufacturing from China, then he said, let us outsource jobs in the service industry. Okay, service industry is IT and ITES. ITES is uh, information technology enabled services. Okay, so that is uh, the target he had. He said, let us outsource this. And he also suggested, because countries like India were looking for capital, they wanted money to be invested here. And so what uh, Romney did was that he also promoted offshoring. So I think I told you the story. That's how Google landed up here in India with its second biggest office outside of the United States of America. That is in Hyderabad. And Facebook landed up here. Oracle, we don't hear about Oracle. We hear about Google and Facebook. But Oracle's biggest operations outside of America are in Hyderabad. You don't hear about IBM and its operations here. And you have the India Development Center of Microsoft that came to Hyderabad. It was so some of them went to Bangalore, found the weather to be a little more salubrious. I wouldn't say salubrious, actually. Salubrious, we shouldn't use it in the context of pleasant weather. Weather that is conducive for good health is salubrious weather. And Hyderabad weather, even today, is considered to be more salubrious than the Bangalore weather. It has always been seen as more salubrious because Bangalore had a lot of trees, not anymore. There was a lot of pollen, and as a result of that, uh, Bangalore was famous at one time for respiratory diseases. Okay, and Bangalore has a more pleasant weather, and therefore companies went there. Okay, because the summers in Hyderabad are terrible, and manufacturing all went to Chennai. Ford went to Chennai. GM went to Maharashtra and to Gujarat. But like I said, they started offshoring and they all came to these different states. And it was a win-win situation as far as the Americans were concerned, because here you paid people in rupees, you did not pay them in dollars. Okay, so people were working for rupees, and paying in rupees was much, much easier, lower compared to paying people in dollars. So you were also looking at the profitability. And remember that this was a time in Indian history that competitive uh, federalism came into being. And because of competitive federalism, people were offering, all states were offering all kinds of concessions. Okay, they were offering all kinds of concessions to companies that were setting up their uh, uh, their operations here. They were giving them all kinds of things like tax holidays, incentives to set up offices, and so it was a win-win situation. Okay, so you're getting, not only are you getting encouragement from respective governments, you're getting tax holidays, you're paying in rupees, and you're getting the same work done. And Indians work to the time zones that were in America. So all these, except for the manufacturing sector, the rest of them all were working 24 hours a day. Okay. And oh, and I forgot to talk about Deloitte. Deloitte was also, its biggest office is in Hyderabad. So you have all these different people. And so this was one way of combating that problem that people had with, uh, what should I say, with the idea of immigrants. Okay, so is it a great democracy? No. You should read Noam Chomsky, and you should read Manufacturing Consent. And if you read Manufacturing Consent, you will see that uh, quite a few people, uh, you will see that Noam Chomsky says that American democracy is controlled by business houses and banks, or simply put, corporations and banks, when in reality, but they make it appear as if it is the people who want this. And I think I told you the story of Barack Obama. Barack Obama, when he became the president, the poor people thought he'll bail them out, but he didn't bail them out. He bailed corporations out. Okay. And so that is how democratic the United States of America is. So people argue that it should be called an oligarchy. Okay. Now, if we are talking about the USA following a two-party system, does it really follow a two-party system? The thing is, the USA does not have a political party system at all. What it has is a system of caucuses. It has a system of caucuses. What is a caucus? A caucus is a group of people, like-minded people, who have a certain kind of purpose. So you have a system of caucuses there. So if you look at the whole run-up to the final elections, you have these things which are called the preliminaries. What are the preliminaries? The preliminaries is Donald Trump didn't belong, there's no membership to anything called uh, a Republican Party or to a Democratic Party. So people simply can go and offer their candidature and say, to the caucuses, either to the Republican caucus or to the Democratic caucus. And you can say, this is what I can do for you. This is what I'll do if I become the president. So that is the preliminaries, where a number of candidates offer their candidature. And over a period of time, these people are, what should I say? Over a period of time, there is a weeding out of the different people who belong to different caucuses, to different, who are appealing to different caucuses. And ultimately, you are left with the person who's most acceptable to the caucus. Okay. And people expected Bernie Sanders, who is a much younger person than Joe Biden, to actually become a member of, to become the Democratic candidate. But Joe Biden somehow got the vote from the caucuses. And please remember that you choose a running mate. So if you win, your running mate also wins. Okay, your running mate is the vice president. There is no separate election for the vice president. If you say so and so, Mike Pence was the running mate for Donald Trump, and you had Kamala Devi Harris, who was the vice presidential candidate, who was Joe Biden's running mate. These people are elected without getting elected, if you can make sense of that. So what kind of a system is that? Okay, and it calls itself the world's second biggest democracy. And right now these caucuses are calling themselves, they have narrowed down to two names, Republican and Democrat, for some time now. That's been the thing. But there were instances in the past when 4 or 5 candidates also have contested elections. And Franklin Roosevelt was also president almost 4 times. Okay, not almost, he died in his 4th term. And that is when they brought in an amendment to basically say, that is the 25th Amendment, I'm sorry, which basically says that you will have only 2 terms per president. Otherwise, they were going on and on, some of them. Franklin D. Roosevelt being the good example. Please don't confuse him for Theodore Roosevelt. That is another person, right? So it's not really a two-party system because there are no parties at all. It's a no-party system. It's a system of caucuses. You've seen that the theory of separation of powers is not really something that acts that way when you see it in practice. It is most certainly not even a democracy, leave alone world's second biggest. It's not a democracy. A vice president who just becomes vice president. It's almost like being nominated. 538 people electing the president. Now, all this has to be seen in the context of, I'm going to wind up with the United States today. You have to see it in the context in which these offices emerged. The context was that they wanted a powerful country. And incidentally, the ministers, the equivalents of ministers, we have ministers in our country, but there they have secretaries. The secretaries are not elected, they are nominated by the president. Okay, and usually at the behest of corporations. I think I once asked you to see this film by Michael Moore, which is called Capitalism, a Love Story, in which he demonstrates, it's a docu-feature, uh, in that he demonstrates that it is a Goldman Sachs bank. Goldman Sachs, this is a spelling. This particular bank leads a consortium of banks who always who push for the appointment of their candidate as the Secretary of Finance. Okay, so these people are not elected by the people, the secretaries, the so-called equivalent of ministers. So how can you even say that this is a democracy? It is not. But if you look at what Thomas Jefferson said, Thomas Jefferson said that America, after it came into being, he said once the Constitution was written, he said the Constitution has to be reviewed every 19 years. And in the 20th year, there should be either a completely new Constitution or there should be some kind of changes in the Constitution, not amendments. Okay, changes to the Constitution or a completely new Constitution. Because he said with time, concerns of people will change. What people want will change. And therefore, if a constitution has to be representative of the will of the people, then it has to be changed every 19 to 20 years. That is what uh, Thomas Jefferson, that's what Thomas Jefferson claimed. He claimed that it should be overhauled or removed and a new one put in every 19 to 20 years. But the Americans have done exactly the opposite. At the time of the framing of the Constitution, they wanted to build a strong nation. They wanted to have a president who would be strong and he would be assisted. They didn't want elections for secretaries because they wanted the American president to choose the best of uh, the available talent, take their advice, and take the country forward. So at that particular time, all this made great sense. Protecting the house, the smaller states from larger states by making the Senate the upper house. All these things made sense. But when you don't change the Constitution, and it's a very thin and small little document, it was adopted in 1789, and till today it has had only 29 amendments. And they are proud of it, that they have not changed it. Okay, they have not changed the Constitution. They have not changed the style of working, but everything else has changed. Everything else has changed. Now you have this whole white supremacists. This is not a country that treats people equally. It's a very deceptive country. In this country, when you go to work, when you basically go to work, you're treated okay. If you're doing your work properly, they'll treat you all right. But they will not socialize with you. The whites will not socialize with Indians. The whites will not socialize with Chinese. And Indians will not socialize with the blacks, the African Americans, because the African Americans represent the filth and the squalor that they have left behind in India. So they don't want to be with them. So what do? You create ghettos like Fremont, Sunnyvale, Plainsboro in New Jersey. Okay, these are all concentrations of Indian populations. Okay, they are concentrations of Indian populations. And when we talk about multiculturalism, I will be talking about that in class for the MA students anyway, because it is a part of the syllabus. Pluralism, multiculturalism, when we talk about all those things, you will see that how cultural minorities are those which are negatively affected. The largest immigrant population is the Germans. But what say do the Germans have in the governance? The main governance has remained Anglo-Saxon Protestant, even though compared, if you probably take uh, the entire population of the United States of America, the Anglo-Saxon Protestants are a minority. But yet, it is their culture, it is their, uh, what should I say, their concerns, Jewish businesses, all these which control the United States of America. Okay, so we'll stop with the evolution of institutions in the United States of America with this. Tomorrow, when I meet you, I shall pick up. Now, I'll give you a choice. You decide. Should I do the problem of democracy or problems of democracy, or would you want me to do the construction of nation states and how that happened? Which would you prefer?
Problems of democracy, sir.
Problems of democracy. Yeah, that needs only one class, by the way. It doesn't need too many classes. It basically doesn't need too many classes. We can do the nation states thing day after tomorrow. Okay, is that all right? Is anyone left or has everyone?
We are yes, sir.
Here. At one time there were 12 people, only 7 are there. So most people have left. Okay, half have left. All right, thank you very much. So I'll see you tomorrow then, and we'll do the problems associated with democracy.
Sir,
Democracy.
problems with democracy only in one country or system itself?
The system itself.
Okay.
The problems of democracy in the system itself. When I say democracy, I mean representative democracy. Okay?
Okay.
Yeah. Representative democracy is not a solution to problems. It is a problem in itself. Okay, that's what
Sir,
we'll.
I feel no government is perfect, I think.
It is not a question of government being perfect. It is a question of the system. Okay, representative government systems should represent the maximum possible people. Okay, just let me leave you with a thought. The Congress party with 24% vote in the country and the full UPA with 31 or 33% vote in the country ruled the country for 2 terms. Okay, that was how much was their representation? Totally 31 or 33.
It's problem of election system, I think.
Yes, I will be talking about representative democracy is also electoral democracy, but we'll also look at other kinds of models, deliberative democracy and all. We'll look at them as well. Okay, so thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
So we'll do the democracy thing tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Righto. Bye-bye.